Okay, everybody, welcome. My name is John Gutierrez. I'm one of the founders and executive director of Croix Preparatory Academy. Welcome tonight to our informational webinar. Normally we do these in our building, but as you know, for reasons that are all too familiar, we're doing it this way. So thank you for joining us. Certainly appreciate it. I'm going to go through a slide presentation, which is just going to talk about a little bit of the history, some of the educational philosophy, some of the business philosophy of St. Croix Prep. We'll go through this slide presentation. I'll pause it at a few points in time just to take questions. You'll see the breaks when I do that. So you can submit questions via the chat or via the question and answer. Chad Olson is assisting me with this, so he'll help me if I get stuck in some of the navigation or the questions. So as I go through this presentation, it'll probably last about an hour, depending on the questions, and it might be about 30 slides. 3 or 4 are the most important. We'll spend a lot of time on those, and you'll notice why they're important. Sorry about that. Okay, even some navigation problems. So the first thing I want to talk about is, obviously, you know what we do, and what we do really relates to the educational process of K-12. But what I also want to do is talk about why we do what we do. And a couple years ago, we worked with a consultant and really talked about why we do this educational model, and we came up with this manifesto. And I'll let you read it, but the nuts and the bolts of it is really, this is not necessarily about getting into college or about getting into jobs, but it's about preparing students for life. So when we partner with parents, we invest in the future, we invest in your family, and we want them to thrive and not just survive. The whole educational experience, everything from the community to the academics, the athletics, the arts, even the homework. These are things that prepare people for the future. So it's not simply about getting through middle school or high school. It's not simply about graduating from high school on that commencement day or even on the college day, but it's about the lessons that we learn throughout the educational journey that will prepare us for life. So this is why we do what we do. From an agenda perspective, these are the things we're going to talk about. A little bit of introduction, history, the educational philosophy, some of the business mindset that we have, and then really whether this is a good fit for you as well. And then we'll have time for questions and answers. And if you do have questions along the way, certainly feel free to submit them, and I'll pause and see if I can take care of those. Really, the idea is this is an educational opportunity. It's not a task, but it's something that we allow students and families to pursue the educational objectives that they want after they graduate here. So whatever those objectives are, whether they are not to go to college, whether they are to go to college or university, whether it's to stay in state, whether it's to go to St. Andrews, for instance, where we have some go, or to highly selective schools, that opportunity is available to each individual student. We have the personnel in place, we have the curriculum in place, everything is available so that people can accomplish their goals. What that means is to get to those goals, you have to achieve the grades, which means we'll have homework and classes related to that. But what's important about this is to understand that if my goal is different than somebody else's goal, I only need to get the grades to accomplish my goal. So what I mean by that is I joke and I say that I went to the Harvard of the Midwest, which is Gustavus Adolphus College, which is not the Harvard of the Midwest. But nonetheless, if today I wanted to get into Gustavus, then I probably need to get grades of a 3.5, maybe 3.6, ACT of 25 or 26. And if somebody else wants to go to, we'll take the Ivy League schools, a Yale or a Princeton, then they should get all A's. They should get a 33 or a 34 on their ACT. And both of those paths are available to each individual. It's just a matter of which choice they want to make and to honor that choice and to give that path available to families and to students. And so that means if somebody gets a B, that's okay. If that accomplishes their goal, if they get a C or a D, the same is true as well. So this is about individual opportunities for every student and every family that comes to St. Croix Prep. Along the way, beginning in kindergarten and all the way through to that time of commencement, there will be the development of the lifelong skills, whether it's organization, time management, work ethic, how to succeed at performing on a test, how to not do so well, and how to advocate for yourself. And these are the lifelong skills that we're talking about that really are necessary in the preparation for life. So this is the vision of the school. The mission, this is one of the slides that has not changed since 2004. And the mission is, as it reads there, St. Croix Preparatory Academy. So St. Croix Preparatory Academy means everybody that works and is associated with the school. So for us, it'll be myself, it'll be the administrative team, it'll be food service, those in the athletic department. Everybody has the same goal, and that goal is to develop each student's academic potential, personal character, and leadership qualities. So again, that each student relates to that vision of opportunity that you have for your children and that the children and students have for themselves. What is their goal? And that is our duty, is to try to make sure that we allow the student to accomplish their academic potential so they can go on to their next step. Notice there's nothing in here about the convenience of teachers or administrators or technology directors. This is not teacher focused. This is a very student focused mission statement, and it focuses on their development academically, personal character, and their leadership qualities. When we say it's academically rigorous, well, let me give you an example of that. Academic rigor comes in a couple ways. One is, for instance, the curriculum. So for instance, when we talk about geography and history, we will not start with what a traditional school might do and start with the neighborhood, the town, the city, the state, and then eventually get to the country. What we will do is we will start with the world. We'll start with continents and oceans, and kindergartners will sing their continents and ocean song, and they'll learn that by Thanksgiving. They'll be able to identify those things on the map. And then when we begin the history and geography, beginning in grades 1 through the lower school years, we'll start at a point in ancient history and migrate to a point in current history. So they'll learn about ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Greece, ancient Rome, the Punic Wars, and they'll migrate to a point in current history, which might include civil rights, abolitionists, Harriet Tubman, and the Underground Railroad. So we will get that rigor through the curriculum and through the content. So it's not going to focus so much on that individual student, what they're familiar with, but it's going to focus on the world and the student's place within the world. So that's the academic rigor. Obviously, there's homework and grades, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And content-rich educational program grounded in a classical tradition. So this is the rigor and the content that starts early on in kindergarten, and it is grounded in a classical tradition, which we'll talk about. So again, the mission statement has a threefold emphasis: academics, character, and leadership, and this will relate to each particular student. St. Croix Prep is a charter school, so it's important to ask or to answer what a charter school is. We're a public school, tuition free, available to all. This is really be based on application and enrollment, which I'll talk about at the end of this session. We are a mission-driven school. You can see just from the information that I discussed, and it's focused on a particular educational approach, the classical educational model with the focus on academics, character, and leadership. Well, we are an independent school, and what I mean by that is even though we reside within District 834's boundaries, we don't report to District 834. We have our own board, our own administrative team, our own policies, our own curriculum. So we operate independently of District 834, even though we have a great relationship with them. On the school board, right now it's a combination of parents and teachers and community members. Right now there are 8 board members, and we have board elections every year, and those come up in the May timeframe. As a charter school, we are accountable for all the student achievement, all the state compliance, MCAs, so the standardized testing. All of our teachers must be licensed. We have to complete all the financial due diligence audits, comply with special education, all of the Minnesota legislation. So the Minnesota Safe Learning Plan, for instance, now in the midst of COVID-19, all of those things are items that we must do as a charter school. We are funded like a traditional district, really where the money follows the student. So my kids actually have graduated from St. Croix Prep, and in 2004, they started in kindergarten, 2nd grade and 7th grade. And prior to St. Croix Prep's existence, they went to Stone Ridge and Anderson Elementary, and then the money went from the state to those schools, but now they come to where the pupil attends. What's different about a charter school is we don't receive tax levy dollars. So there is a little bit difference in funding, and those are the differences there. So that's a charter school. The facts of us and how we work, we opened, I should say, charter school facts. In 1991, Minnesota opened the first charter school in the country, Twin Cities, or I should say Cities Academy. And right now there's about 160 charter schools, about 60,000 students. In order for us to operate, we must have an authorizer, and that's either, in our case, a foundation. It could be a university, but Friends of Education is our authorizer. They're a foundation that was founded by the late Bill Cooper, who is the board chair, CEO of TCF. Their focus has been on education, and we have been authorized by them since our inception in 2004. When you think of an authorizer, think of somebody that stands over your head with a stick and makes sure that you do the right things, get good student performance, are fiscally responsible, and are compliant with all of the state legislation. We have a very good relationship with Friends of Education. That's primarily because we've been with them for almost 17 years. We are one of the largest single site charters in Minnesota. And what I mean by that is it's just from a student population perspective of 1,200 students, and the fact that we have K-12 students in one particular building on one campus. That provides some benefit to people. Think back to the mission statement and the emphasis on students. So what we know that is, if we see something take place in 7th or 8th grade, and we identify a gap in, let's say, science or in math, we can always walk down the hall to 3rd grade or 4th grade, and we can make curriculum adjustments that way so that we have streamlined our operations and our educational efficiencies. So being a single site charter does have many advantages. It also provides leadership opportunities that some of the older students can work with some of the younger classes. They have mentorships, tutoring programs, and so on. St. Croix Prep does represent phase 2 implementation of charters. And what I mean by that is originally in the 1991 timeframe, we charter schools were really more in the urban areas and would find population of students that didn't succeed as well in traditional larger districts. Phase 2 implementation of charter schools is probably more in the suburbs, and they would have more of an academic emphasis. Could it be for instance, Math and Science Academy, STEM emphasis? So you'll see more of those types of emphasis in the phase 2 implementation of charter schools. St. Croix Prep, we take the MCA tests every year, and like all the other public schools, and based on those scores, for the past 4 years, we have ranked as the state's highest performing school. So ranked number 1 for the past 4 years. Last year, we didn't take it because of the COVID-19 situation. But as we say, number one means the only place we go is down after that. But nonetheless, it's an indication of the academic rigor and the good partnership that we have with our students and with our parents. So those are some of the facts of St. Croix Prep, or I should say the charter schools. About us, founded in 2004, K7. We are now K12. Not 200 students, but 1,200 students. And I think this will be our 11th graduation year. We have 3 classes per grade, 30 students per class, and we have educational assistants in each lower school class. So that cuts the ratio in half. The reason we have 30 students per class is it allows for consistent migration of students between 2nd grade and 3rd grade, kindergarten and 1st grade, and so on. Lower school for us is K4, 450 students, middle school 5-8, upper school 9-12. And the administration looks as it's described there. We have 125,000 square feet of physical space with athletic fields. If you visited the campus or driven by, we have artificial turf field, 8-lane track, stadium lights, and some of those things as well. So that's a little bit about the facts of St. Croix Prep. Before I go on, I will check to see if there are any questions at all. If there are, it doesn't look like there are. Hopefully this is a good pace, and we'll continue. Educational philosophy. Let me just check the chat. Okay. Do we use Common Core? Let me get to that when I get to the educational philosophy, and I will make sure I address that. Educational philosophy, again, let's get back to the mission statement. And from this perspective, I want to take a look at how this relates to college prep. This is the mission statement, which we've talked about before. It's familiar because we've already discussed it. It's the threefold emphasis: academics, character, leadership. And these are 3 statistics. They're a little bit older. I know that they haven't changed that much, but these are the, when we develop an educational philosophy, these are the things that we're cognizant of, and we don't necessarily want to contribute to these statistics. So when you look at the United States and its educational programs and how it fares in international testing, it doesn't do so well. So 14th in reading, 17th in science, 25th in math. So if you were to grade the United States on a curve, we get Fs. And so as we develop an educational philosophy, we are aware of that, and we do not want to be a part of those ranking and statistics. The second item really relates to technology, and really we're in probably more of a cultural battle or a societal battle, but we do have homework, and often we hear the students say that there's too much homework, but we know really the homework really is based on the educational objectives that a family and a student wants to achieve. And this statistic here, the second one on usage of technology, is in fact true. I've seen it demonstrated in my house, and I see it demonstrated all the time in kids within the school, and it starts early and earlier. But what this means is that now during an average week, most students and most kids are spending more time on technology than they do in school. So everything from the texting to the YouTube to I suppose TikTok now, all of those things, and aside from video games and TV, Netflix, those sorts of things. So this is something we're cognizant of and we're aware of, and we try to help parents and students manage this. In addition, as we go through this educational program, we're also aware, just because we do a lot of placement in the colleges and universities, but the typical statistic right now is 1/3 of the students that attend college are taking remedial classes. They're paying for them, and these are the things that should have been accomplished successfully in high school. So the writing, the English, and the math. So we do not want to contribute to those statistics. So with that said, on the college prep, let's go back to classical education, and then we can get to some of the things related to the curriculum. If you remember the mission statement, it's academically rigorous, content-rich educational program grounded in a classical tradition. So now it's important to discuss what is classical education. And so for us, classical education means that we must learn things, and we go through a learning process as it relates to all particular subjects. So that means that we must know some things before we can think critically about them. And we'll talk about that as I get to the next slide. So classical education, I suppose it would be important to talk about the truth, beauty, and goodness, since that is the classical education or the classical definition of classical education. We do believe we accomplish those objectives because of our emphasis on character, because of our emphasis on licensed instruction for the music and the arts beginning in kindergarten, and the goodness falls within that category as well. Classical literature, we will read classical literature where it's appropriate. So in some cases, well, I should say not in some cases, but our students will read Lord of the Flies, To Kill a Mockingbird, portions of Beowulf, the Communist Manifesto, the Odyssey, Iliad, some of Dante's Inferno. The reason we read classical literature is because it is timeless. It has things that apply to us even today. And so that will be a part of our curriculum. There are times that we don't read classical literature as well. And that may be because it's a little bit difficult for people to understand. But we do select it carefully and purposefully. We do have classical languages, and by that, I mean, it's just right now Latin. And as we say, we have to punish students in some way, so this is how we do it. Of course, I say that in jest, but our students do love Latin. That begins in 5th grade, and that can accelerate all the way up to advanced placement classes of Latin in their upper school years. For us, classical education will be defined on the next slide, but I just want to check and make sure I don't have any questions. Okay, let's see. Yes, the school does offer PSEO, and we'll get to that. We have probably about, I was trying to think, 3% of our students do take PSEO classes, and that's really all of this is run through the through our college counselor and our upper school principal. Quasi is on the call. I won't say anything. Anyway, I say that in jest. I wish I could see you all, just so you know, but this is what we have to do for now. So classical education for us is going to be a little bit different than a traditional educational model. We aren't saying that it is the best way, but it's what we are purposely driven by. And so we adhere very closely to that classical education. The items that I have listed down below, things related to Rousseau, Dewey, homework, project-based learning, these are things where we're going to differ from a more traditional educational model. Again, for us, classical education will be this, and that'll be the trivium. And this will be, you know, the mission statement was a very important slide for us as it really lays out the foundation of the academics, character, and leadership driven at each individual student level. When we say classical education for us, this is the slide that we spend most of our time on. And this is the trivium. And for us, this is the 3 stages of learning, regardless of the subject matter. So for us, that's grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Grammar is the ruled stage of learning. So notice that's K4. And so when I started with the mission statement and academically rigorous, and I mentioned the continents and oceans, I mentioned ancient Rome, ancient Mesopotamia, the Tigris-Euphrates River, Harriet Tubman, the Underground Railroad. What I was doing is building the grammar or the knowledge for history and geography for a student in grades K through 4. And if you have children in grades K through 4, you know that if you sing it, say it, or chant it, they can probably remember it. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. We're trying to use it for good. So when we mention the Tigris-Euphrates River or the 12 labors of Hercules or the Punic Wars, the students will remember it. They will know it. Notice they won't be able to understand it or to communicate or to evaluate it, but what we're doing is we're filling up their mind with as much information as possible. That's the grammar stage. We do this for every particular subject at St. Croix Prep. So the same thing with math. So it's addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, percentage, place value. Ms. Karatov, can I use a calculator? No, you can't use a calculator. You can't use it till you're in 10th grade, and it's a graphing calculator for one of your classes. So it's about building the automaticity of grammar at the math level, just like we did with the history and the geography. So this is filling up the mind with as much information as possible because this is easy for the kids to learn and they enjoy it. So for them, they're excited to learn about these things because they just think it's enjoyable. So K4, grammar stage, lower school. Now, as students get older, if you have students in middle school, they migrate to this pre-teen years, and we still deliver the high-level content in a particular subject matter. But what happens now with the kids is they start to ask different questions of the information. So they try to understand it. So they try to sort it out. They judge it. They say, well, this doesn't make sense with this. Why does this work? So for them, and I've had 3 students go through the middle school years, they can be annoying, at least mine were. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to sort and try to make sense of information, of the world around them. This is that understanding phase. When we get to the rhetoric stage, this is the time of communication where they try and analyze information and they start to communicate about the information. This is the teenage years, and we say this is the time they like to argue, and this is the perfect time for them to do that in oral presentations and speech and in writing papers, because now they get to argue and they love to argue. So grammar, logic, and rhetoric. With that, we say that rhetoric stage, that argument stage, can really only be done well when you have the logic in place and the grammar in place. So to give you an example, my son, who is started at St. Croix Prep in 2nd grade and is now, I'll date myself, now 24. He loved basketball, played it in college. But when he was in 2nd grade, I asked him the question, because he loved to watch basketball. I asked him the question, who's the greatest center of NBA history? That actually is a rhetorical question. My son said Shaquille O'Neal, and I then told him that based on his answer, he didn't understand much about basketball and he didn't know much about basketball. So we actually walked through some basketball history. Dr. Naismith, George Mikan, Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Tim Duncan, Hakeem Olajuwon, Shaquille O'Neal. And then when I asked him the question again about who's the greatest center in NBA history, he paused and thought and said, oh, it's either Bill Russell because of the number of championships or Wilt Chamberlain because of the number of scoring records. So he was able to answer a rhetorical question because he understood the information and he knew the information. This is the process we try to go through with all of our students so that they have the ability to think. So this slide, or this area down here, will highlight how some of these things apply to our educational model. So for instance, this is a very content-driven educational model. So we will deliver as much content as possible, and as the student goes through the process, they'll be able to make logical connections to the information and to understand it and then be able to communicate and synthesize information. This is as opposed to projects. So for instance, my daughter, when she was here, I should say prior to being here, she was at another school where they did the decades study and they did a project. And she was in a group and they picked the 1940s, the decade study. She picked the 40s, and they did a obscure voters' right registration case in Texas. So that was the project. They did the research. They did a PowerPoint presentation. They made the presentation, and they got an A. And I was pleased because I like it when my kids get A's. But since it was the 1940s, I asked if they learned about World War II, and she said no. I asked if she knew anything about Pearl Harbor. She said she hadn't heard of it. And I asked her if she knew about Hitler, and she paused and said, I think he's a bad guy. So what this illustrates is when you allow students to choose what they want to learn, while the learning process can be beneficial, there's certain content that they will miss out on. And we believe that there is certain content that must be mastered so that people can understand the world, interact with it, and to think critically. So this educational model is built a lot on content. Technology, we have a lot of technology in place, even more so now because of our situation with distance learning and all the things that we need to do to operate within this COVID environment. But from a technology environment, and I say this because my background prior to 2004 was in the technology world from the mid 80s till early 2000, selling ERP software. But the technology fits into this within the trivium in a way where we say it's an appropriate use of technology. It's a grammar tool. It allows us to get information. It allows us to be efficient. It's not the silver bullet. And so when we use it, we want to make sure that it fits appropriately within our educational model. So we'll talk a little bit more about where the technology is in place. From a character development, let me just hang on one second. Yeah, this will get to the adjustment. Let me just address that now. Well, let me hold off on that. Let me write that down to make sure I get to the adjustment side. No, actually, I'll do that now so I don't forget. So when somebody comes to St. Croix Prep, how do they adjust? What's the time frame like? If they come from a different environment where they might not have learned the Punic Wars, how does that impact their transition into 7th grade? So you have to remember when kids go to school, they do learn things and they're adept at that. And so if somebody comes here in 7th grade and they haven't learned the Punic Wars, remember that the 3rd grade student at St. Croix Prep, likely the only thing that will remember about the Punic Wars is that it was Roman Carthage and that there were 3 of them, and that the Hannibal was involved and there was some salt in different places. So their catch-up time is pretty easy. So the science and the history is, the science and the math, I should say, are going to be pretty consistent. And when students come to St. Croix Prep, we do some placement tests for math and for reading. So the transition is something we're adept at, and we have classes to fit the different skill levels. From a character perspective, again, remember academics, character, and leadership. So character really here is when we have a student in grades K through 4, they will study or learn about a character attribute a month, one a month. So that could be respect, it could be perseverance, it could be service, it could be responsibility. They might read a book on it. They actually might do a project on it as well. And what that means is that they will know what that character attribute is. So for instance, my youngest daughter, when she was in 2nd grade, she came home one night and she said that she had some math homework and she would persevere and get it done. So in second grade, that might have been 15 minutes of math homework, but at least she knew the concept of perseverance. Now that she's a senior in college, perseverance has a whole new meaning, but nonetheless, it started with the character instruction in the lower school, the grammar stage. Middle school, we'll say, is a whole exercise in character development. Jokingly, sometimes we call it the dark ages. The kids do come out of it. My son did come out of it, yes. But really what we try to do here is we ask parents to step away from their kids, to let their kids learn their responsibility as students, and to let them be responsible for their homework and to begin to learn to advocate for themselves. What that means, like for instance, my son, I mentioned him, he was very good at math, but in 5th and 6th grade, he had difficulty turning in his homework. It seemed to get lost in the backpack, which is a common occurrence in probably 90% of the middle school students, especially the boys. And so he didn't get A's like he normally got. He got B's and C's. But what he learned was his responsibility as a student, and that he needed to take care of turning in his homework, advocating for himself, and so on. So the middle school is an exercise in character development. As we get to the upper school, the high school years, there are service hours that are required each year. So 10 hours of service for grades 9, 10, and 11. And in their senior year, they have 20 hours of service that are required before they graduate. Holidays. Now you see why this slide is particularly important to us. When the school started in 2004, I was just coming out of business, had been almost 15, 17 years in technology. And we got to October, and some of the teachers said, well, what are we going to do for Halloween? And I thought, oh, this will be great. We'll celebrate, we'll have costumes. I didn't realize that this might have been a touchy subject. So what we did, and what we still do today, is we do celebrate Halloween. And what we do is we start with instruction. So if a student is in grades K through 4, they will get some grammar instruction on Halloween, an ancient Celtic tradition, 2500 BC, 3000 BC. We will not tell them that the practices during that time involved human sacrifice. We may discuss that in the rhetoric stage, but we won't do that to a kindergarten student or a second grade student, because that's just ill appropriate. And then when they come home and tell you, then you're going to call me, and that'll make it uncomfortable. So we do appropriate instruction on the Halloween for grades K through 8. By the time they get through to the high school level, the upper school level, they've already received the instruction. And so we limit it from that perspective. Do we allow students to dress up? Yes, we do. No blood, no guns, no violence. And if you are in grades 5 and above, you can dress up. You just simply have to write a page paper on who you're going to be and why. So when it gets to be Halloween, we will see students come in dressed up as Amelia Earhart, Albert Einstein, Jackie Robinson, Rosa Parks, Paul Bunyan, and then you'll see a rat. And the rat, it could be and has been a girl named Aurora who said that she's a rat from the Black Plague. So what we do is we give kids the flexibility to learn. We aren't afraid of the world and what is out there, but we want the students to enjoy learning about it as they're here at St. Croix Prep. So that's a little bit about holidays. As we get to, I'll mention this. So when you look at the 3 stages of learning, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, we would say that the rhetoric stage is where a lot of the critical thinking is taking place, because they now have a lot of the content, they understand it, and they know it. But what we do beginning in kindergarten is we do conduct seminars in every grade level, in the different classes. So for instance, your kindergarten student or second grade student can think critically. So they may read a fable, Aesop's fable, and they may talk about it. They may talk about the characters, the choices that are made. And so we begin that critical thinking process in the form of seminars beginning in that kindergarten year. Let me just see if I have questions at all. Okay, so the classical education, multiculturalism, and trigger warnings, I'll get to that in probably in my next slide, or actually a couple slides. And visual tour of the school, actually not at this point, but we'll try and arrange something so that we can have something on the website, so we can do that. Let's see. Religion. So we don't prescribe anything from a religious perspective, but we will describe things. So for instance, when we talked about the history of the geography, so when our fifth graders are learning about Europe in the 1500s, they will learn about the Reformation. So they will learn about the Protestants and the Catholics. They won't decide who are the good guys or the bad guys, but they will describe the events that took place, because you have to understand what took place to understand the politics of Europe, the religious movements, and then eventually what takes place in the United States. So when we study all of the continents and oceans, and we begin that geographical and historical study that starts in kindergarten, we will describe the world religions. So again, it's description versus prescription. So we will do that from the religion perspective. This also forms the format for our sex education. I know the slide doesn't appear to do that, but what we do is we teach the grammar and the state mandated instruction related to sex education. So that will be eventually it'll be body systems, but it'll be plant reproduction and things related to that. And what I mean by just the grammar and the state mandated instruction, those things related to sexual preferences and so on are tied to family beliefs. And so we respect and reserve the right for families to have those discussions. The classroom style, sometimes we have to talk about that because it is St. Croix Preparatory Academy. It's a classical education. We have a nice little emblem on the side with Latin, and we have uniforms, so it must be kind of a stodgy place to be, which is incorrect. It's a very fun place to be. It's student-centered, and really the focus is on the teachers accomplishing this particular objective. Deliver the grammar, deliver the content to the students. Do it in ways that you think will work best. That could be sitting in desks, that could be on the floor, it could be in groups. Right now it's over a computer, but the idea is that we want each of the teachers to exercise their professional capabilities to accomplish the objectives of the classical education and the trivium. Two things that are often kind of stated about this type of model relate to creativity and the critical thinking, or what I call domain expertise. So there's a lot of content delivered. So sometimes the objective is, or the objection is, well, now you're just going through the drill and kill, they're memorizing this, you're stunting their creativity. We would argue that creativity only comes at the rhetoric stage. So in order for somebody musically, or to be able to write creatively, or anything athletically, whether it's basketball, in order for them to exercise their creativity, they must know the rules, they must master the basics, they must master the skills, they must understand how those skills relate, and then after time, they're able to exercise their creativity. So we don't believe that we are stunting creativity, but we actually believe that we're creating that creativity. And then domain expertise really relates to the idea and the thought and the firm belief that we are developing critical thinkers. Critical thinkers are developed through this entire model. So for instance, I use the example of my son who loves basketball, spent a ton of time on it from the time he was before kindergarten all the way through his 4 years of college and playing. So he can communicate, evaluate, and synthesize and think critically about basketball. That critical thinking skill is not transferable. He can think critically about basketball, but he cannot think critically about classical music, or he can't think critically about biology, or he can't think critically about poetry. The reason is this learning model is how critical thinking is developed. Every subject matter, we must start with the grammar, go through the logic, and get to the rhetoric stage. So this critical thinking is what we are trying to develop all along in all the subjects that we're trying to instruct. So this is the trivium. So go back to the mission statement. Croix Prep will develop each student's academic potential, personal character, and leadership qualities through an academically rigorous and content-rich educational program grounded in a classical education. This will be classical, okay? Okay, let me see. Then I think I'm going to get to, so this will get to the trigger warnings, multiculturalism, and some of the things that I mentioned. So when we go to the grammar, logic, rhetoric of reading, so notice we have grammar, logic, rhetoric, knowledge, comprehension. So when we have kids in grades K through 4, what they're learning is what we'd call, they're learning how to read, reading readiness, phonetics. Are there sight words that they can read? Do they understand the consonant, vowel, consonant words? They're building vocabulary, so they're learning how to read. This is elementary reading, just learning how to read. As they get older, 4th grade, 5th grade, they start to make a transition. And when they get to middle school, some of that transitions can be a little bit difficult, because now what we do is we hold up a book and we say, what kind of book is it? What's the genre? If it starts off once upon a time, we may have a clue. Who are the characters? What's the rising action? What's the plot? What are the choices that people make? So now we are teaching them not how to read, but how to understand, and how to analyze a book, how to analyze a short story, what is taking place. This transition can be difficult, but when they get through that 7th and 8th grade years, they begin to understand the analytical reading. When we get to the rhetoric stage, so now the students are reading classical literature. So actually syntopical reading. No, maybe not. I'll have to check that slide, Chad. What that means is when they read a book, they're able to take that book and analyze it with another book, or analyze it with the same author in another article or something like that. So this is their ability to integrate this information with other literature, maybe even things that are in society. So when we get to the bottom, in that grammar stage, we have state standards, reading well by 3rd grade. We want students to be able to read well by 3rd grade, because we know if they don't read well by 3rd grade, they're going to have a lot of difficulty moving into those middle school years. So now when we get to the middle school years, your kids are really smart, and we will push them so that they enjoy reading and like reading. And so what happens now is what we want to make sure of is that the academic appropriateness it fits for them, but also the developmental appropriateness. So we want to challenge them academically, but at the same time, we don't want to introduce developmental themes which are would be premature for them, because again, then that will make for them coming home and asking you all kinds of questions, and you calling us up and asking us, why did you teach them this? So that's the challenge there. When we get to the rhetoric stage, this will get to some of the trigger warnings and so on. We believe in classical literature, so we will read classical literature. So for instance, I think one of the, let's see, one of the school districts even recently, I think they eliminated Of Mice and Men, I think because of the language, or I know some will not read Uncle Tom's Cabin. Call of the Wild has some dog violence. So we will not issue trigger warnings. We'll read good classical literature. And because this is important for us to develop people that can think, that can understand, can interact with what will eventually be significant themes, which will prep them for life. So that's what I mean by trigger warnings. We will obviously have opt-out clauses and allow families to choose alternate literature if some of the literature is not, if they don't find it appropriate. So like for instance, Dante's Inferno is about the circles of hell. And but great literature. So if people are uncomfortable with that, they can certainly choose some different literature. So I'll get to the, maybe I'll talk about it here. So when we get to the multiculturalism, really I've had this conversation with the faculty over the past couple of years, but all of these conversations have to go through that grammar, logic, and rhetoric stage. So what happens right now in some cases is, students are trying to read multicultural related articles or books, and that's really the rhetoric stage. And they aren't able to understand the rhetoric stage unless they have gone through the logic stage or if they've gone through the grammar stage. So, so for instance, Kendi's book on how to be an anti-racist, for instance, is a rhetorical book. A lot of the same things can be accomplished by reading Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, which would fit into here. So we are going to take a different approach on some of those things, and maintaining the classical literature and content-driven methodology that we've used in the past. So some of the thinking skills, and this is some of our teachers have done this in the past. Some do it in a modified sense now, but I want to give you an example of how people have actually tried to develop the thinking skills. So we had a teacher a few years ago who taught literature in terms of the 4 seasons of life, and it was romance, tragedy, satire, narrative, and comedy. And so from a romance perspective, romance is a type of literature, and it would be your typical Disney, where you have good guys, bad guys. There's somebody that always wins. But on the left-hand side, you have all the characteristics of romance. So there's a hero, there's a nemesis, people are born in obscurity, there's a perilous journey, there's a symbolic death, symbol of power, sidekicks, and so on. So when you look at literature, when you look at movies, they will have these characteristics. So what happens is when you are able to identify that, then what you're able to do is to do things like write a compare and contrast paper between The Hobbit by Tolkien and Old Man and the Sea by Hemingway. And you are able to do that because they both have romance characteristics in there. So this allows people to put hooks into literature, into articles, into movies, and so that they're able to make comparisons and to understand how some of these things work. So this does 2 things. One is it ruins movies for kids and for all of us because we can see how this works. I mean, we all have the sidekicks in the movies, so you can see it in the movies, in the books, and so on. And what it does is it gives an illustration into the attraction to what I would call initially, your voyeuristic TV. American Idol, or even now The Voice, because everybody on The Voice is, or American Idol, or America's Got Talent. They're born in obscurity. They have a mentor, is the mentor John Legend, is it Blake Shelton? They have sidekicks. The sidekicks are their fellow contestants, their symbol of power is their voice or their instrument. American Idol, the nemesis is Simon, and everybody always wins and gets the contract. So we use this, and we use other things like this, and we allow teachers to do this so that they can develop thinking skills within their classrooms and within their students. So that's a little bit about the reading and how we try to develop those thinking skills. From a technology perspective, again, my background was in technology. I was a VP of sales for a ERP company, and I used to say never confuse technology with selling. And so now what we do is we say never confuse technology with education. However, we find ourselves in a little bit different era, so we kind of had to adjust that. So we'll talk more about that as we talk about our COVID-19 environment. The philosophy is we always have an appropriate use of technology. It's a tool which enhances. It's not the silver bullet. Ironically, we would rather have a book in every student's hands as opposed to an iPad or a Chromebook. Now we do have a Chromebook in every student's hands, but we do prefer books and reading. We use it a lot in our curriculum and in our assessment. You see a list of all those now, and you see that we're using it now to conduct this webinar. We use it for communication, student information system, and so on. So we are very much used to technology. We just want to make sure that we use it appropriately. Not the silver bullet. The law of amplification. It amplifies what people want. I suppose the easiest way to understand this is look at social media. It can be used for good, it can be used for bad. We're just aware of that. And we're also aware of the Bill Gates quote, which is, if we have a process and it's a bad process and we automate it, we just accelerate our problems and our difficulties. So before we go through that technology implementation, we want to make sure that we're doing it for the right reason. Latin and logic, and I'm almost through this section, then I can see if there's any questions. Latin, if you've taken a foreign language, Latin is a foreign language, but you know that with that, when you see the first word in the sentence, it can be a verb, so you have to go through the conjugation. It could be a noun, so you have to go through the declension. This will help students learn the English language, their grammar, their spelling. It'll increase the vocabulary, and it's the foundation for classical literature and Romance languages. So it begins in middle school, and our kids do enjoy it. It could be primarily because they're learning some things that their parents aren't learning. So it's an important part of our curriculum at St. Croix Prep. Back up from the curriculum perspective, Spanish is the other language that we use, or that we do instruction in, and that'll take place in the high school years, and all the advanced placement classes are available there. So from the question related to curriculum, Common Core, we address the Common Core curriculum. We don't specifically implement it. We implement things that far exceed that and cover the concepts and some of the items in the Common Core. So that's really how we go through the instruction. So this is a model from the educational perspective. Hopefully this is helpful, but as you can see, each one of the lower school, middle school, and upper school have different goals and objectives, and that's really what we try to accomplish there. So question is about, for those students who are not choosing to attend college, will they get support in helping them choose a job that best fits their skill sets? The answer is yes. What we find is that what is developed at St. Croix Prep is the Prep for Life motto, in essence, is the ability to organize, to manage time, to communicate effectively. And then we have job fairs. Each year is, oh, that's great. Anyway, I got this great question. So then they see what is out there for them, what skills match, and we also do a skill finders test for juniors, so they know what they like, what opportunities are available to them. So again, that really gets back to that individual opportunity for each one of the students. So we will do assistance with that in the form of those things, and then also with our counseling office. How much homework do kids get on average per night? So I'd say that the homework starts in the lower school. So we would say with grade 1 through 4, it probably will be reading and math, reading and math, reading and math. And so when you get through up to that 4th grade, that could be, maybe I should ask Nora, who's online. It could be up to an hour a night. It could be also what your parents' goals and objectives are for you. When you get to the middle school and to the high school, then it's really going to be based on what those individual opportunities are that students and families want to pursue. So additionally to the reading and the math, when you get to the middle school, then you will have your science, you'll have some Latin, you'll have some history. That'll be sporadic, based on schedules, based on assignments, but depending on the goals, that homework can be, it could be an hour, it could be 2 hours by the time, 2 hours a night by the time you are in 8th grade. And then when you're in 9th grade, we have students that get through and graduate by doing, based on their goals. It could be an hour a night, it could be 3 hours, 4 hours, depending on what school they want to attend. So I have a question from a 4th grader, Nora Zachariasen. Thanks for listening, Nora. So she asked me, what are you the most proud of about our school? And she is in grade 4. So what I am most proud of, honestly, is the fact that so many people have made it their home, that they enjoy it, that it's grown from 200 students to 1,200, not because the growth matters, but because people like it. People find that they enjoy the community, they like to learn, and that it allows them to accomplish the things that they want. And so for us, regardless of what that is, if it's getting a job, if it's going to college and not finishing and dropping out and pursuing something else, those are the things that matter most to us, is the fact that we get to participate with them in the pursuit of their dreams. Because we believe that we can help them accomplish them by prepping them for life. So that is what I'm most proud of. And I'm most proud of the fact that people like students like Nora will ask questions and listen to this presentation. So do your teachers keep their political biases out of their lessons? We do the best we can on that. And especially today, I can't believe you guys are watching this presentation. Of course, maybe you have something else on the background. So the idea with all of this is we want people to be able to think. And so we're more cognizant of the biases now. So what we try to do is at the start of the year, and as we review during professional development, is we try to remind teachers that when we get asked some of these questions about what they may think, it's not so important what they think, but it's what the students think and how they think. So we try to keep that conversation very distinct, and we allow for the discussion of ideas. So that's what we're looking for. And some of this is, especially these days, can be especially difficult, but we are very cognizant of that, because it's not about us similar to the religion. It's not about prescribing thought. It's about describing the facts and the issues and allowing students then to form their own opinions. If a child has not started at St. Croix Prep, testing and evaluations. So it's primarily in the reading and in the math areas where we will do the testing and the placement. So like I said earlier, some of the things in science and in history, that's easy for the students to catch up, but we will do testing so that we can appropriately place the students in their right classes. So, and also when they attend, if a student transfers into 9th grade and their past learning model is very different from St. Croix Preps, how do you make sure the student does not feel like they're already behind? Again, that gets with the placement test. And then also what we do is the high school principal and the college counselor, and a counselor that also does work with the PSEO and also with jobs, they will actually meet with the family and with the student to make sure that they are appropriately placed and that they can feel successful at St. Croix Prep. Let's see, what else do I have here? High school kids and the lottery. So let me explain that one at the end and just make sure that I take care of that. So let's see. So I just went through the mission statement, and classical education is the trivium, and that's the grammar, logic, rhetoric. And everything within that grammar, logic, rhetoric then is our educational philosophy. So that's one side of the coin. So we know that we need to do that well, because that's what kids are here for. That's what families are here for. So we know that we have to protect the classroom and make sure that that operates in accordance with that. So you flip the coin over and we have our operational philosophy. And that's really how we look at our business. And so let me talk about that side of the coin. This relates to my background in technology. It's founded in the diffusion of innovations theory. Everett Rogers is a theorist. A lot of modern books on it. Jeffrey Moore books, Crossing the Chasm Inside the Tornado, The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. It's very prevalent in technology product life cycles. Well, all of your tech companies are familiar with this, and so many of your product development companies are also familiar with this. So normally this is where I ask for a show of hands as to how many of you have seen an adoption curve, but I can't see you, so I will just proceed. So an adoption curve is really an illustration as to how and when a market will adopt an idea. So on the first part of the curve are the innovators and the early adopters. There's the chasm in the middle, that separates the pragmatists or early late majority. And so this is where people will jump on the bandwagon for to do something and to try something out. So for instance, Chad Olson is behind the scenes navigating us. He's our technology director, and he has this, he likes Apple products. So when a new product comes out, he is usually the first to get it. He's an innovator. So he wants to have it because he wants to see how it works. He wants to try it out. You can see it in his phone and in his technology. Sometimes it doesn't always work that well, which I joke to him about. So for me, I'm more of a pragmatist or early majority. When I get my phone, I just want it to work. I don't want to work the bugs out. So this is, everybody fits into this curve somewhere. So this is the adoption curve. There are, everybody has a profile. So for instance, the innovators, when I speak of Chad and the phone, he wants to be the leading edge. He wants to see what it's like. He's willing to assume the risk. And as for me, I I'm just going to follow at a distance. I just want, I'm going to be a little bit suspicious. I just want to make sure that it will do the functions that I want. So when we look at this, this is the adoption curve. These are the profiles that people have. So now these next two slides will be the ones that really form a look at how we look at our business. So from the adoption curve perspective, when if I tell the St. Croix Prep story in 2004, when we started the school, it was K-7, and it was in 200 students in a remote, I should say in a location, which I'll show you later. It was a building that was run down, renovated. There were actually pillars in some of the rooms. And the mission statement was, the mission statement that I just showed you. So who are the people that actually attended and who actually came to St. Croix Prep in those first years? They were mission driven. They were innovators. They weren't afraid of risk. If it didn't work, no big deal. They'll just go somewhere else, go back to where they were. They'll find another school. So the people that would not come to St. Croix Prep in 2004 through 2009 are the people here who really want stability. When we were K-7, we had people ask us what our high school curriculum would look like, and we didn't know because we didn't know what our 8th or 9th grade curriculum would look like. So, but these are the people that did not attend in the early years. So the goal of an organization when it grows is to cross the chasm till it gets to the mainstream market. So it is viewed as a viable option by many people. So internally, the objectives are this: growth and product leadership. So we started off with 200 students. We went to 250, to about 343, 444, 735 students here, and then 888 when we crossed the chasm. So the idea of growth was always in our vision to accomplish our objectives. In addition, when we grow, we have to exhibit some product leadership. And what I mean by that is we have to have a product that people like and people will return to. And so in a Stillwater school district, that's hard to do because Stillwater is a great school district. So what we did is we focused on satisfying parents and students, and so that they would return. So those are the first two items that we concern ourselves with as we get in this stage of the development. To cross the chasm to get into the mainstream market, what we had to do is really build a school building on a school campus, because as you get to your middle school grades and your upper school, high school grades, kids like math, but do they want calculus, or do they want proms? Do they want athletic teams? What is it that they want? So what they want is, when they cross this chasm, they want, at the top of the curve, they want a whole product. They want something that represents a K-12 institution with a building, with food service, with athletics, with all the amenities that represent a full educational experience. So crossing the chasm for us is when we built the building. So that's 2009, 2010. So now when we are here, well, the gorilla, he weighs 800 pounds. The 800-pound gorilla is the one that does not warmly welcome newcomers into their space. And so so when we first built our building, we did not get a warm reception from the local school district, the state legislature, Star Tribune, and so on, primarily because that's the way the 800-pound gorilla works. Right now, I don't have chimpanzees on this particular slide, but there are chimpanzees that exist, and we are one of those that now peacefully coexist with the 800-pound gorilla. And by that, I mean, like, for instance, I was on a conference call with the superintendent of Stillwater this morning, talking about, Minnesota Safe Learning Plan, bringing kids back to school and so on. So we have a great partnership with Stillwater at this point. But these are important parts of the model that we are familiar with, and it's the way we talk and how we look at what we're trying to do. the objectives now that we have, as opposed to the growth and product leadership, now we have operational excellence and customer intimacy. So the reason these are important is because we are no longer a school of 200 students, we're a school of 1,200 students. We don't have just 60 families or 70 families, now we have 600 families. So we have to create that intimacy that makes people feel like they belong, that gives them feedback, and so on. So that's why we have lower school, middle school, upper school. We have our clubs, our organizations, and our sports. So this is part of that adoption curve. Again, so what that means is when we look at this, for instance, there are whole product implications. So people are now here for different reasons. They want that full experience on the academic side, they want it on athletics, and they also want it on things related to arts. When we have people, when we interview people, we interview based on where they fit within the curve, or where if the job fits at a different point in the curve. So we have, if need be, and we have done it in the past, we can interview 75 to 75 candidates in a week in group interviews, and we can get to our final 3 probably in a few days. And we do that by asking questions like, how do you deal with chaos, which is a pre-chasm question. Are you a leader, a follower? Which role do you typically fulfill and why? Which is another question related to the front end of the curve. How do you manage a class and communicate with parents? Which is a mainstream market question. So we look at this from a lot of different perspectives. So policy development here, literally our bullying or anti-bullying policy here was no bullying allowed. Serious. Here it's about a 7 or 8 page document. So people here, generally, people that are invested in the mission are more intrinsically motivated. People in the mainstream market more extrinsically motivated. So this is how we take a look at where we are internally and how the market perceives us and opportunities in the market. So this is a little bit about the adoption curve. Let me just check one thing here. Yep. Oh, question. Let's see. Band or music in upper grades. Yes, the music starts in the music starts in lower school, starting in kindergarten, and then band, orchestra, and choir start in 5th grade and go all the way up into upper school. Yep. Thanks, Chad. Sorry about that. And let's see. Okay, I'll get to the athletic stuff. Okay. Okay, so for instance, just to give an illustration of the adoption curve. So facilities, would you come to this school if this was St. Croix Prep today? There's our first location, K7. It's the Stillwater Post Office right now, which looks a lot nicer. This is K5 in 2008, 2009. Okay. The old Herbergers, which is right off of 36 across from the Holiday Station. This was our 611 building in downtown across from the Lowell Inn. Okay, so just think of the adoption curve and think of pre-chasm. So who would not come to this school? There's many, many people who would not come to this school because they want that whole product. So this is our campus now. So, and in the back there, you'll see our website too as well. That's where our athletic fields will be. So this is part of that going across the chasm and transitioning to a mainstream market. So when I got to the top of the curve, just think above that 800-pound gorilla, what our students want is that whole product in terms of academics. So they do want those advanced placement classes. We have over 20. They want a counselor. They want somebody that's going to assist them in getting to that next step. They want a track record of having placement of students in selective and highly selective colleges and universities. And they want educational travel, which unfortunately we've had to abandon over the past months because of our current situation. But normally we have 8th grade trips to DC. We have travel that goes to Italy. So that would give background in the ancient Rome, the Renaissance in Florence. And then we have a marine biology trip to the Cayman Islands and a service trip to Guatemala. So think of those academic experiences that high school students want. So all of the societies, the student councils, debate, knowledge bowl, all of the things that they want, those are the things that we have in place for the academics within St. Croix Prep. We also do some fundraising, which has been put on hold as well, but an all-school marathon, which typically we raise dollars for the classroom. So that's the whole product as it relates to academics. Again, now the athletics, and there was a question on this. We're a member of Minnesota State High School League. So we have begun our practices for boys and girls basketball, for alpine skiing, archery as well. But so when somebody comes to St. Croix Prep, they want to be able to experience that athletic experience. So these are the sports that are offered. In nearly all of these, there are basketball, the most probably, everything from the middle school programs all the way up to the competitive high school sports. The rest are generally freshman, junior varsity, and varsity teams. And so those are competitive. We have teams that have won conference championships, teams that have participated in state tournaments. We have athletes that have competed in Division I, Division II, and Division III collegiate sports. So the time frame for that, somebody asked about the time commitment. Those are standard high school sports. So for instance, they will be practices after school or before school. Generally it'll be an hour and a half to 2 hours. They're probably an hour and a half now because of our COVID schedule. And so then the students will have to manage that and then adjust their study schedule accordingly. We have a mascot, and funny story is before we came to the school and before we built this building, Crossing the Chasm, we asked each one of the grades what the mascot should be. And the kindergarten class thought that our mascot, based on the fact that we have an emphasis on character, they thought we should be the St. Croix Prep Respectable Rabbits. We didn't know how that would look on the gym floor or uniform, so we went with lions. So with that, we do have the standard lettering, letter jackets, lettering criteria, awards, banquets, concession stand, and we do some fundraising to supplement the athletic program every year with an annual golf open. So the field development was completed in the fall of 2017. The only other item we have left is bleachers, and we're trying to figure out ways to get those. So that's the whole product for the athletics. We also have this for the arts. So the questions related to choirs, jazz bands, and all of those, we do have all of those. They compete in the Minnesota State High School League events, get superior ratings. They also, on occasion, will take trips to, I think, Chicago or St. Louis, depending on what performances are available for them. We also have a performing arts center. So to back up, from a facilities perspective, all the classrooms are there for the academics. For the arts, in 2013, we built a Performing Arts Center, which is a 350-seat auditorium where we host the concerts and plays and musicals. So that is the facilities related to the arts, and then the facilities related to the athletics were the athletic fields, which were completed in 2017. So that's the whole product. Let me just do this quickly, and then I was going to see how much I've got here. Okay, here's the situation where we are now. This is another curve, obviously, the Gartner Group. This is from Technology Days. This is what we used to talk about, and this is why some of the situations now are a little bit stressful for us as schools and parents and kids. But what we did with over the course of years is we would evaluate, like for instance, new technologies based on a hype curve by the Gartner Group, or new literature, or anything that's new or out there trending. We'll take a look at it and put it in the hype curve. So for instance, when we ingest, because there's a sense of satire and irony in all of this, when we were asked, would you like to have an iPad in every kid's hands? We said no, and that is because what we recognize is the pattern that this curve represents for an iPad in every kid's hands. So when we look at this, an iPad is started with a technology trigger. That means we had this iPad, this low-cost computing device that now we could put in kids' hands. And when people saw this, they said, oh, what this will do is this will solve all of our educational issues, the peak of inflated expectations. Now we can have integrated curriculum. Kids can take their curriculum, their tests, everything at home. They can sign on. They can have immediate contact with curriculum, with grade books, with teachers, etc. So that's the peak of inflated expectations. Generally, what this means is that nobody's really using it, but that people are talking about it. The trough of disillusionment is the example that we used before is the reality of somebody trying to implement this. So the LA school district, when they spent maybe $1 billion on iPads, and they had academic performance which didn't increase. So now you get to the slope of enlightenment, which eventually will, there is some benefit. People are seeing how this works and can be beneficial to an organization, and then you get the plateau of productivity. So what has happened here is with COVID, which is quite unsettling, every one of the schools, every one of the families probably existed in a pretty mainstream market, consistent, predictable sort of environment. COVID really pushed everybody to before the curve. So there is, it's pre-chasm. Everything changes. We don't know what's going to take place. And how are we going to adjust? Even for us, we don't know what's going to take place in the next week, COVID case rate data, all of those things. So everything got pushed to unpredictability. So what that did is now we actually are living this. We have to put computers in every kid's hands, and we have to figure out how to go through this as quickly as possible so that we are in a position where we're utilizing our technology so it is productive and it is efficient and we're accomplishing our educational goals. So that's kind of where we're at right now. You know, I'm doing, oh my gosh, sorry, taking a little bit of time. I apologize, I'll get through this quickly. Operations, we do have uniforms, and it's for two reasons, and that's primarily because we want build community and remove peer pressure. So it's a pretty lax implementation of the uniforms. So you can have shirts untucked, and you can have the different types of shoes and socks that you want. So the idea is just to make sure that we have a community, and we also are cognizant of body types and transitions and how kids want to hide their bodies. So we just want to make sure that they're dressed in uniforms and fit in within the school environment. We do have non-uniform days and spirit wear days. Service projects I mentioned earlier. Special education and English learners, this is the population. We do have a full special education staff here, so we can accommodate the special education learners. We do have a YMC before and after school program that's conducted here on site. And our school day is 9:30 to 4 p.m. And that is because Stillwater provides us our bus transportation, and we get revenue from the state related to bus transportation. We pass it to them, and they provide us the bus service. But then they again get to determine our start and end time. So that's our time right there. I think some of these things I've mentioned already. Yeah, this here, Washington Post, I just want to mention this. We've been named the most rigorous high school for a few years in a row. When you look at these, you have to understand why we get the rankings that we do and what's the criteria. For this one, this is based on advanced placement class participation. So we have about 70% of our high school students do take advanced placement classes because it's available to them. It's positive peer pressure. We want them to understand what those classes are like. So really this gets to opportunity, the opportunity available to students. You see some of the statistics there on recognition and highlights. So is this a good fit? So what I want you to do is I want you to think back to the 3 main slides that we had: support of the mission, academics, character, and leadership. If that's important to you, then it's probably a good fit here for you. Do you like the educational philosophy? So our definition of classical, our emphasis on college preparatory academy, the trivium, how we approach that methodology. And then the operational philosophy. So we're used to growth, we're used to change. That's coming to play a lot more now just because of the nature of our environment. But that's really how we work, and we will make decisions quickly if we feel it's in the best benefit of students. This is the homework that I mentioned previously. So again, alignment with students and families should fit with this. Again, the homework in the middle school and upper school will vary based on goals of kids. And remember that every goal matters, every goal is important, and because somebody doesn't want to go to a certain school doesn't make them a lesser person or anything like that. So time for student adjustment. Generally speaking, the lower school kids can adjust in 10 minutes when we can get them to school. Sometimes the adjustment for high school students is pretty quick as well. Sometimes the middle school can be a little bit more difficult. That will depend on where what school they are coming from, whether they like uniforms, and just where they're at in their development as a teenager. Yes. Quickly, you've seen this trivium slide. Some of the things that apply here is how to read a book, which when I talked about reading, this really referenced this particular model. Classical education, a well-trained mind will give you a background on curriculum and how classical education works. When I use the example of World War II, Adolf Hitler, Pearl Harbor, this really got information from E.D. Hirsch's book, Cultural Literacy, which really is, we're trying to develop content within an individual so they're able to think and to understand and to relate in a critical thinking manner with what's taking place in the world. Mindset, we call this a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. We say, is this we use two different words. One is can't or won't. So what happens here is we start homework early because when kids are when they first come to school, they love homework. They think it's great. They enjoy it. They have fun. So this is what they do. And then through this, they learn that they can learn things, they can accomplish things, they can overcome hurdles. When students get to the middle school, they start to say that they can't do things. The reason they like school here is because students want to please their teachers, they want to please their parents. When they get to middle school, they want to please their peers. So now school is not cool, so they start to say, I can't do this work. And it's really not can't, it's about won't. There are very few that can't do the work. There are some, but most of them are just an unwillingness to. So that's why we talk about mindset. And as people study, as they set their objectives, we do believe that talent is overrated. We believe that intelligent and direct work and study, 10,000 hours, we believe that people can accomplish the things that they want to accomplish. Why do we do this? 2 books, The World is Flat, Crazy You. We really just want to give students the opportunity to pursue their next step, and we don't want to bait and switch them. So when they start to apply to colleges and universities, or they start to interview for certain jobs, we want to make sure that they're adequately prepared. So in selective and highly selective colleges and universities, about 35% of those students come from outside of the United States. So it's just about giving people the opportunity to pursue what they want to pursue. Common misunderstandings: we don't make kids smart. We don't have too much homework. Sometimes this will happen because of the technology use, or sometimes it'll take place because maybe sometimes I remember a couple times my daughter would come home and she'd have 6 hours of homework on a project. And then when I asked her when that was assigned, she would say it was 6 weeks ago. So part of that is the learning process. We don't fix kids. We aren't a religious school, a conservative school, a liberal school, or anti-Christian school. And we are not the best school. So what we do is we have a school that's built on a mission, an educational philosophy, and also an operational philosophy. Now, regarding an open enrollment, open enrollment period ends on January 8th. And so if you've submitted an application, then you will be considered in that lottery. And then what happens is next week, we will perform the lottery and probably start notifying families, maybe not the end of next week, but the start of the week after. We will fill our kindergarten class first. So we will send out that information saying, so for instance, if we have 200 applications in the kindergarten lottery, and we have 90 spots, we will fill those first 90, send out letters, and then based on the lottery, we will assign waiting lists to the students after that. For the subsequent grades, grades 1 through 12, we will wait for probably that April timeframe, when we will do a check on our enrollment base to see, are you coming back? Are you staying? And then we'll be able to fill spots based on that. Generally speaking, the high school is maybe not so much 9th grade anymore, but 10th through 12th grade is far more open. And generally, it's easier to get into the kindergarten class and then also into the 10 through 12. Let me just see. Sorry. Didn't realize I went so long. Just want to check on questions. Athletics focus. Yep. Thanks, Andrew, on the individual meetings with the upper school. Yes, do we accept students on an IEP? Absolutely. That's part of the transition plan. So if you have a student with an IEP, we can, what we do is we meet with our special education department and then with the principal, and we make sure that we adopt that IEP and do appropriate programming. Diversity of St. Croix Prep. It kind of reflects the Stillwater area. Well, go back to the adoption curve. When we first started the school, we've got probably 60% of our students were from the Stillwater area. The rest were from outside. Now that we're more mainstream market, about 92%, no, I should say 88%, I know that. 88% come from the Stillwater area of Washington County. The rest are outside of that. So the diversity is pretty representative of this particular area. How large are your wait lists? So again, the reason we talk about adoption curve is early on, if we had well, I should say this, wait lists are probably between 40 and 50 per grades K, except the kindergarten wait list is probably about 100. But after that, it's probably 40 or 50 per grade. And then that'll go all the way up to that 8th grade. In the early years, again, mission-driven, pre-chasm, we rarely had students leave. And so if you were 10th on the wait list, I would almost guarantee you that you would not have an opportunity to attend. Now we're in a mainstream market. It's more of a consumer environment. People are looking at a lot of different opportunities. So it is possible if you are 30th or 40th on the wait list that you could get an opportunity to attend and to get an invite to fill a spot. What do kids do that play hockey? Right now we have a co-op with Gentry Academy. So kids play hockey there, and the girls play hockey with Woodbury. To confirm, a potential 9th grade student will not know until April or March if they've secured a spot. That is probably correct. Although I think if you were to call the upper school office, they would have a better feel because they also manage the 8th grade list and those coming in from 8th grade, but they would be able to give you a feel as to what they expect that transition or what that waiting list to look like. Let's see. I'm trying to see if there's. Yep. So the kids on 2nd and 4th grade, they probably will not know. So I should back up. So we will conduct the lottery for all the grades next week, and we will do the informing immediately for kindergarten and shortly thereafter for all the other grades. But because of kindergarten has 90 spots that are open, we'll be able to fill those immediately, but we won't know on grades 1 through, or in this case, 2nd and 4th grade, we won't know until we test the current enrollment of our students now. And we do offer a tennis team. So that is also present as well. We do not have a high school swim team at this point in time, and we don't have a co-op with them. So we don't have that right now. Let's see. Let's see if I've got any others. Let's see. Art classes, drawing, painting, photography. Yes, we have. Again, the art starts in the kindergarten, but when we get to that upper school and high school, everything from ceramics and drawing. We have kilns here, so we do have those in place. Yep. So I'm sorry, on the lottery for 9th grade, they will all be drawn next week, and then you would be notified probably in that April-May timeframe. But let me just suggest this, that if you were to call our upper school office, ask for Diane Runge, R-U-N-G-E, she will be able to give you a much better feel for that. Because what we have done in the past is typically over-enroll the 9th grade by a significant amount, 20 to 30 sometimes, because we know that 9th graders sometimes make a lot of different decisions. So why is it so late if it's drawn next week? So for instance, if we draw a lottery, let's say for 4th grade, and you are 3rd on the wait list, we don't know it, or let's say you're 10th on the wait list, we won't know how many spots we have in that grade until we poll our current families to say, are you coming back to St. Croix Prep or are you going somewhere else? So we do that, that survey in that end of March timeframe. So that's why you will know your lottery number, but you won't know whether you will get extended a spot probably until that March or April timeframe. Okay. Okay. I think I've got, so the athletics, the homework, really that's gonna be based on objectives. So again, just think of a couple things. Think of the mission statement and think of what your goal is as a family and as a student. And then think of the whole product. What do you want that school experience to be like? The athletics, the arts, the choir, the orchestra, and how do you want to mirror those in with that academic experience? We want to give students and families the opportunity to experience as much as possible, and then we will let them commit to that as much as as much as they want to. So the idea though is in a smaller environment, we want to give families and students the ability to do all of those things, and we have many that do that. So it's just a matter of how you want to manage your house and how your child wants to manage their time. Okay. I think, let's see, 2 more chat. Okay, good. Okay, so I appreciate all of the, appreciate your time. And again, so you know, we will, the open enrollment period ends on January 8th. We will conduct the lottery on, did I say the 11th? I think it's Tuesday. And then we will begin notification of those in kindergarten that have available spots. And then everybody else will get a wait list number from the lottery. And then once we poll our families in that spring timeframe, we will be able to extend offers as spots open. So again, I appreciate everybody doing this and taking time out of their schedule. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call us. And we are delighted that you took time out of your schedule to learn about St. Croix Prep. And if it's a good fit, we hope to see you soon. So thanks so much.